Jenna, let me begin with you. Let's get right to the recovery of these 3 victims. It is a very unusual situation with regard to the local police. They say they think they have the wife. They think they actually do have the body of 𝓗𝓛. They are not quite as clear when it comes to the 2 girls. Can you explain?
Yeah, so the Colorado Bureau of Investigation Chief Mark Hamper said in a press conference with the Frederick Police Department this morning here in Colorado that they think that they know where the bodies of the 2 little girls are, but he was very careful to not disclose anything about speculation about the cause of death, the manner of death, or really what the shape the bodies would be in at the point that they may recover them.
Tom Fuentes, what does that say to you, given the fact that he worked at a petroleum company and that he said he left for work at 5 o'clock in the morning the day all of this began to unravel?
Well, to me, it says that it may be a very difficult, maybe even impossible situation to try to recover the bodies. At a petroleum company, you could have dangerous acids and chemicals and vats and pools and drains, all kinds of things where you'd be able to dispose of soft tissue like a human body. And it's just gruesome to even think what possibly happened to those children.
I want to read from 𝓗𝓛's Facebook post from just August 1st. August 1st, that would be 15 days ago, just 2 weeks ago, she was writing on Facebook, "Do you know what I love about waking up every day? It's a brand new day, to have a fresh start, to be better than I was yesterday, to help someone feel better and happier, to make someone smile and laugh." 2 weeks later, police and investigators are combing through the house where she and those daughters and husband Chris lived, and instead are walking out with evidence bags. We're told large bags of evidence, and reports that Chris has made this confession. Jenna, what else do you know about this alleged confession?
Yeah, so reports are coming out that that even after so many media interviews took place from the time that 𝓗𝓛 and the 2 little girls went missing, then late last night, the reports came out that Chris Watts did confess. He was detained. There's an affidavit for warrantless arrest. He's currently being held without bail. We learned that as well, and the Weld County District Attorney will file charges Monday.
Body language expert Janine Driver. Janine, I want you to look alongside our viewers and me at this moment that Chris Watts appealed to all of us to help him find his family.
If you're out there, just come back. Like, if somebody has her, just please bring her back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring her back.
This house is not complete. I hate to put myself in the shoes of anybody who's missing a family, but oftentimes behavior is the first thing that investigators seize on. Janine?
First of all, the house is not complete. The house misses her. How about her? Him missing her. He also doesn't say my wife, my kids here. He's keeping it more distancing. We call this distancing language. The concern that I have here, Ashleigh, is this long eye close that he's showing, and we see this eye blocking often with people, and it's a big concern. And also, if you're going to pretend to be crying, your nose should run, your inner eyebrows should pull together, and there's a reason why we have an ear, nose, and throat doctor, because it all connects together. There is no sadness in this clip.
So let me go over these issues and what your science shows you. For the rest of us, we're watching a guy talk, but you're looking at specific flags, and I want to list those out. The first one is that his eyes move to the upper left. What does that tell you?
So one of 2 things, it depends on if he's right-handed or left-handed. Typical right-handed people, when they look upper left, is recalling an incident. A right-handed person, a right-handed person, upper left is I'm recalling an incident. If I look up to my right, I'm creating an answer. So either way here, it doesn't matter, because what he's doing is he's going visually in an inopportune time. This should not be happening. He should not be going visually, so this is a hot spot.
So then you also note anger in his face.
Yes. Now this is anger right here. We see a lot of anger and a lot of disgust. And even after anger and disgust, we then will see a smile in a couple seconds here. We see this at inappropriate times. I miss my wife. We had a conversation. All we did is I'll leave it like at that. And then that anger leaks out, that lips disappear. I say, Ashleigh, when we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear.
You also said, you mentioned that his eyes flutter when he speaks, but then there's this other moment that was odd. He's laughing, or he's smiling. He's got a delightful smile at one point in the interview.
Thank you for pulling this, and thank you for your producers. This is where he says, I want them back, and he smiles. This is called duping delight. This ripped my heart out. This is what had me saying 2 days ago, this guy did it, because we saw this with Susan Smith. Susan Smith drowned her 2 kids. She put them, the young boys, toddlers, in the seat, their car seats, drowned them in the water, and when the helicopters were above and she was doing a press conference, she goes, the police still haven't found anything, as she slapped this same smile that we saw here with Chris Watts. This is duping delight.
I mean, it's fascinating to see these elements that you're able to point out in your science. We should remind everyone, at this point, he's facing first-degree murder ×3 and tampering with evidence. But at this point, the charges haven't come down officially, and he is innocent until proven guilty. Okay, there's something that I want to play for you in the light of all of these allegations made by Chris, the man who confessed to killing his wife and sticking her in a grave and dumping his baby girls deep into pitch black oil, has the gall to ask us all to help us find his family, and then has the gall to tell the police, she did it. My wife did it. My wife was the one who killed those girls. I think this guy is a piece of you-know-what for saying all of those things to us, knowing damn well where those people were, where that family was. He lied to all of us. Why are we to suspect for a moment he's not going to lie to the police about his beautiful wife, 𝓗𝓛, who couldn't have said anything but loving things towards him, and more loving things towards those little baby girls that he says she strangled? He says, the liar says he strangled. If you need more evidence of what she felt about those children, she wanted to always be together with those children. Always together, including the days that she worked. She wanted to always be together with those children. And here's how she said it.
We're not promised tomorrow, you know? We're not promised anything, but to be able to enjoy our children and every crazy moment, it can be super crazy. I'm not gonna lie, my kids are crazy, but I love them, and I love the fact that I can be there for them. Bella knows that mommy doesn't go into work, so when mommy leaves the house without them, it's boring to her, you know. We go everywhere together, and we do everything together, and that's what she's used to.
She's a mother who loves being with her kids all the time. Does that sound like a mother who, because her husband wants to split, she kills the little kids? Does it? There is an indication from at least one person that perhaps the marital bliss, at least as expressed a couple of months ago on Facebook, may not have been all it seemed. 𝓗𝓛's mother works in a salon, and 𝓗𝓛 traveled this summer for 6 weeks to North Carolina to see her family and took those little girls with her. And Chris came for one of those weeks as well, and they all, as a family, went to that salon to stop in for some haircuts and a little catch-up. But this is what one of the colleagues at the salon now says about the marriage.
She was definitely one of those people that when she walked in the room, it was just like sunshine. Chris was very standoffish. She didn't really say anything. I said hi to him. He kept his head down. She mentioned, you know, about them having problems, the Shannon and Chris.
And you said you thought they were going to separate.
Oh, that was the plan. That was definitely the plan.
Separation was the plan. That was definitely the plan. Why, you might ask? Well, if there's any indication, and it's a thin indication at best, but two other people enter the picture. Friends of the Watts, the Thayers. They spent weekends together, pretty close, in fact. And in fact, when Chris Watts appealed to all of us to help find his missing family, he was taken in by the Thayers. They looked after him for those 2 days. And boy, do they feel bad about that now. This is what they had to say about what 𝓗𝓛 had told them about a possible infidelity.
He said that it came to her mind that possibly he could be cheating, but at the same time she was like, you know, he has no game.
Jenna, it's probably best to look at the entire picture. Whether there was infidelity, who knows, on either side, right? But the truth is there are facts about their financial existence that are starting to emerge that start to create the canvas of their lives. What are some of those facts?
Yeah, and so the reports are coming out that there may have been at least $500,000 worth of debt that was accumulated by the family, not to mention, you know, mortgages and other financial obligations, and also just difficulties surrounding employment. And some of those things are just coming out. And what's interesting, Ashleigh, is that, of course, you know, social media paints one picture that most of us, I think, are hesitant to put anything negative on social media so it can appear that everything is going just fine. But now that these stories are emerging from families and friends, as well as the hard facts of their financial situation, that's probably what the district attorney will look at in terms of a potential motive.
And when we say that 𝓗𝓛 Watts posted lovingly about her children and about her husband, that is not an understatement. In fact, it's hard to find anyone who seemed to love her husband more. I want you to just look at how she talked about Chris Watts on her Facebook page, especially since she met him in a low point of her life when she was gravely ill, and how he changed everything.
My health challenges happened. I was diagnosed with some health challenges, and then I met Chris. I met Chris because of those health challenges, and because of my health challenges, because I got so sick, I let him in, and he only knew me at that time. He knew me at my worst, and he accepted me. And, you know, through your vows, like through sickness and everything, he's been there, and it's hard for people to get. It's hard for me to understand, but he stuck around, and he stuck around because he was the one for me, and he is amazing, and I can't tell you how wonderful he is.
Not if what the reports say are true, that he confessed to the police that he actually murdered her and his two little girls. And you know, she wasn't the only one who thought that Daddy was amazing. Bella thought he was pretty amazing too. What you just saw was 𝓗𝓛 Watts 4 months ago. What you're about to see is Bella Watts from just 2 months ago, and just a few days before Father's Day.
My daddy is a hero. He helps me grow up strong. He helped me snuggle too. He reads me books. He ties my shoes. If you're a hero, blue and blue, my daddy, I love you.
And 3 months ago, that daddy had a birthday. And for his birthday, 𝓗𝓛 said something on Facebook after putting together a beautiful collage of their family. 16 different photographs, all put together with this: "Today I celebrate you, Chris. You are absolutely the best thing that ever happened to me in 2010. That year, you were placed in my life when I was at my worst. I was just diagnosed with lupus. and fibro, and I felt like my world was crumbling around me. Then I met you. We have so many incredible memories of these past 8 years. 2 beautiful girls, moved halfway across the world, sold house, built our home for our family, and you constantly do for us. You work your ass off. You're an amazing husband and even better dad. You are the blessing I've been looking for my whole life. You are chasing big goals and dreams and never stop. You support me in so many ways. I hope you have an amazing birthday. I love you, baby. So many details are starting to emerge about the Chris Watts that we didn't see on all those Facebook videos, and the Chris Watts who didn't emerge in all those Facebook posts. What are we discovering about this man?
And, you know, friends and family and even people who just recently met Chris are describing him as standoffish. There's a recent report out of North Carolina. A woman named Michelle Greer happened to run into the family, both Shanann and the little girls, as well as Chris, during a vacation in Myrtle Beach. She actually has photos from August 2nd of the family, and she describes him as standoffish, where she describes Shanann as interacting with the little girls, taking pictures, and says there's no way that Shanann could have been the one to kill the 2 little girls.
In fact, you know, he may have been standoffish, but he still did his duties for those who saw him out and about. He just, not only days before the girls vanished, was out with them at a birthday party. He took them to a birthday party. Jeremy Lindstrom is a family friend who said he just couldn't believe this was the person who's now showing up in orange and shackles. Have a listen.
I mean, he would reach out and help anybody that needed help with anything. He was a good mechanic. If you needed help with your car, he'd help you. If you need help moving furniture, he'd be over there in a heartbeat to help you out. You don't know what, when, why, where, how everything goes weird. Just horrible. Why do people do this? Why does it come down to this? Had to have been an easier route.
So, Jenna, these opposing descriptions of Chris Watts, the now accused family annihilator, he would have done anything for anyone, but he was very standoffish. So now you look for all the other clues everywhere else in this family's life, and it turns out back in 2009, this whole family picked up and packed up in a hurry. They sold a house in Belmont, North Carolina that was in Shanann's name, and apparently took off, leaving just about all the furniture behind. This is from the Denver Post. What do we know about the person who bought the house and what that man was able to tell investigators?
Yeah, and you know, it's these types of conflicting reports are very interesting because people only have one view of the family, and so we're learning a lot more details now about a bankruptcy that surfaced, and again about these other reports that that are surfacing from the family that bought the house. That just found it very odd that there was so much left in the home.
Oh, wow.
Mark Salzman, you're a technology expert. Explain to me how Alexa just might be the linchpin and the actual witness to what really happened in the house that night.
So after you say the wake word, which is her name, then this device, this Amazon Echo or other similar device, records everything you ask her or tell her, and it saves it in the cloud on Amazon's servers. Now you, as an Amazon Echo owner, can go in and delete that data if you want. You can do it on the app or you can do it on the website, but it's all kept because it helps make the experience better for the customer. As you can hear there with the little girls talking to it, they're not quite as articulate, but Alexa may understand these girls over time through artificial intelligence, and they start customizing it. Once you delete it all, you start from scratch as if you bought this device out of the house. So the authorities could...
Could go back to those files and get everything that they've been saying to Alexa over the months or years. It's all there in the files unless you're clever enough to go in and delete it, which, of course, if the police do, they would see that it were recently deleted. More important to the fact, though, here, what's germane to this case is you have to wake Alexa up in order for her to begin the recording. But can I also ask you this? Because I have one of these devices. Sometimes I say things that aren't Alexa, and she starts recording. There are a lot of wake-up triggers for Alexa that sound sort of like Alexa and sometimes nothing like Alexa.
Yeah, so that's true. Sometimes the device, this smart speaker or a smart screen, thinks it hears the wake word and it starts recording. Once it realizes you don't want her, then she shuts it back down again. And if you look back in that log, that file log, it will say something like unknown request because you just let it go. You didn't mean to call her up. But if the authorities did want to listen to what happened that night or in the days leading up to it, providing that the husband, the wife, or the kids said her name first, they will know 4 things. When something was said, because it's all stamped by time. What device was used and the location, because they may have more than one. It may be a living room Alexa or a bedroom Alexa. It'll know what was asked, and it'll also know what was said and who asked, because it also keeps a voice recording. So it could be the husband or the wife or the kids.
When you're not a millionaire, I mean, this family was not making as much money as they needed to make to live the lifestyle they were making. If I went through some of the actual numbers, you'd be alarmed, in fact. The monthly expenses alone were up to $5,000, but the monthly net income for this family at one point was reported at about $4,900, leaving behind about $11 every month. So that in a bankruptcy filing tells you are spending beyond your means. I want to just show you, if I can, what we discovered from Chris Watts's paycheck. Now, albeit this is a paycheck from 2015, and it was filed because of a bankruptcy document, but what's really curious is in the small print. Child life insurance, $1.20 per check. That apparently was for Bella because Cece wasn't born yet. Spousal life insurance for about $3 per check, and biweekly earnings of about $2,400. So somewhere around $5,000 was what he was making. And then 𝓗𝓛 was working part-time back then, not quite 40 hours a week, but about $18 an hour. So you can imagine when you see major purchases that were being made just months before, just 6 months before a bankruptcy was filed. They have a home at $400,000, and they have a brand new Ford Explorer at about $600 a month. So these are very, very tight times for a family, possibly living beyond their means. But did anybody suspect anything, Jenna, at this point about the financial situation? Or is it just something that seems like it's 3 years ago?
Well, no, I mean, there are definitely some of the finances, of course, will always play into a possible motive. And you have definitely a bankruptcy that was as of June 2015 that was reported, as well as the life insurance. And so how that factors into a possible motive is still being determined.
Yeah, I want to show, if I can, some pictures. There's, you know, sometimes there are small details that might go unreported, might go undiscussed in light of the larger story, but there was actually one more little member of the Watts family left behind in that home. It was a member of the Watts family that was listed on a financial document at one point for $5. It was their family dog, and we've come to know that that family dog was named Dieter. We saw that family dog in a lot of the different Facebook posts, and this one in particular, now in retrospect, from 𝓗𝓛 Watts' Facebook page, is particularly distressful.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Give him kisses. Say happy birthday.
Birthday, birthday.
He's giving you kisses. You want to give him a kiss?
Yeah.
Is he gonna give you kisses?
I gotta kiss you.
Give him kisses. Give kisses to Dieter.
Was this telling piece of information in the legal filings at the time that Chris Watts was arrested, and it's all about a mistress, that he'd been having a protracted affair with another woman. Has she surfaced? Do we know anything about how she factors into this picture?
Ashleigh, out here in Colorado, the rumors are just swirling around about this mistress, but the police are being extremely tight-lipped. We don't know a thing about her other than the belief that she is a co-worker of the father.
And I know that there is a name on the witness list of a co-worker who is also a woman. I know that has probably lent to a lot of rumors. 𝓭𝓪𝓼, you're on the ground out there. You went to this person's home. You took a look around. What did you see?
Yeah, that's right, Ashleigh. So this person is listed on an official document in relation to this investigation. I paid a visit to their home. No one answered the door. There was a car parked on a side street nearby, but again, no one answered the door. It was a pretty nice, one-story home. It seemed like, it was just a very nice home, but no one answered the door, basically.
So, James Galliano, I want you to take a look at something that our team noticed in many of the videos that we've been scouring for clues on this case. And I don't know if it's a huge clue. I don't know if it'll play into this story. I don't know if it'll play into a trial. But it didn't go unnoticed by people on social media as well. In those videos, the day after this family went missing, he's not wearing his wedding ring. But in many of the other videos, he is. Some of the videos from just walking around the house, he's wearing his wedding ring. Some of the videos, he's not. And I understand if he's an oil worker, maybe he wouldn't. But here he is in other days, wearing his wedding ring, playing with the kids, messing with their hair. In some of the family portraits, he's wearing his wedding ring. He's an oil worker, so perhaps he just doesn't. But it wasn't something that went unnoticed. Is that something investigators would notice as well?
Absolutely. Investigators are looking for anomalies. They're looking for things that are different. And what you have to do is you have to establish a baseline. You have to say, this is the way that the individual acted and comported himself throughout the first few years of their marriage. And now, all of a sudden, he's doing different things. And if it was his custom to wear a ring, if it was his custom to do certain things or not do certain things, those are absolutely something, Ashleigh, that investigators want to take notice of.
Jack Ford, what about prosecutors? Do they look at that and say, that's something I'm bringing up in court?
Sure, especially, Ashleigh, if the defense here, if it goes to trial, the defense is what it seems to be, which is saying he comes across his wife strangling the two daughters, and in a fit of rage, he reacts and he strangles her. You're going to, as a prosecutor, point to things to be able to say to the jury, look, that's just not consistent. That's not what he would be doing if indeed this horrible tragedy unfolded in front of him. And you'd say, for instance, look, the ring is gone, and you know that he's involved in a relationship with somebody else, and maybe now he thinks he's free to engage in that relationship. So you're going to look to find anything that you can, that, and as James said, anything that you can that seems inconsistent with what he's saying, and try to kick holes in everything that the defense is offering up as his version of what happened.
There was something else about that video. We're zeroing in right there on the accused's hands for the wedding ring. But there was something about the demeanor. We've all made light of the fact that how could a man who had just witnessed all of this be so cavalier with the cameras? And it wasn't just one interview. It was several different television stations who showed up. He was all too willing to join TV stations and beg for us all to help him find his missing family. There have been people who have noted that the oil tanks that are located in that area could actually be something called oil separators. And it's possible that they could be oil separators that are heated in order to separate the impurities out of the oil before piping that oil elsewhere. And if that's the case, would this oil field operator know that? And might there have been an intention to have those bodies going into tanks, especially heated oil tanks, to dispose of them permanently and just to dispose of all evidence? And again, you'll have to walk me through this as the engineer. There are plenty of tanks on that property, both large and small. What do you see?
Well, the ones that I have seen appear to be stock tank oil tanks, and basically they look like they're atmospheric tanks that are not heated. They're storing the oil at atmospheric pressures and temperatures, and there is a small tank to the side, which is an outflow tank, And I'm not sure, but I'm wondering if he put their bodies into that tank because it's wide open and it would be easy access for him to put it in there. Now, if he were able to shut down a heated tank, he would have to be able to get through it with what they call a manway instead of a manhole. And usually those things are pressure sealed as well. So I don't really think that he actually put them in the larger tanks, but perhaps in the smaller tank. But you may have information, direct information from police exactly where they were found and in which tank they were found in.
Well, they're being extremely tight-lipped, as you can imagine, Don, but your expertise is helpful just in trying to get to the bottom of this. Several of us had thought that perhaps he buried 𝓱𝓛 instead of putting her into the oil tanks with the children. I can't even believe I'm saying these words, because it would have been very difficult to perhaps haul all of those bodies, of course the mother being much heavier than the children, up those very steep stairs to the top of those tall tanks to get into what you call the manhole. But it is possible, correct? They could have been in what you call the pit tank, the overflow tank to the side. You can access those. They would fit if you wanted to dispose of children's or a grown body. You could have gone into that pit tank on the side or top tanks.
Yes, and it's where the overflow can come out. And if he's an operator, he could have pulled some oil off the bottom that was heated, if it is heated. It doesn't look like a pressurized type tank, which I would expect if it was heated. But the oil that could come off of there.
Opening those manholes would be difficult. If they were filled with oil, as we learned they were, the pressure would make that very difficult to open those manhole capping devices at the top of the tanks, right?
Right, and usually a lot of them are at the bottom, so they almost have to be empty. Yeah. And so what I'm thinking is that if anything, if he was using it for anything special, it would have been to perhaps get them soaked in oil so that it might remove his DNA from their bodies, that sort of thing.
I opened this block with the story about secrets, and I think now we are starting to perhaps find out some of the even bigger secrets. Because now is the time in any murder case you start looking for past answers, and sometimes the past actually comes to you. Tonight we have someone who claims to be from Chris Watts' past, Chris Watts' recent past. And we are not going to show you this person because he wants to continue his life without consequences for speaking out in this case, but we are going to let him tell his part of how he connects to this story. This is a story that we have to be honest with you, we can't independently verify, but it is a story that could be extremely telling as we try to figure out what happened in the Watts family. This is a man who claims to be Chris Watts' former lover, and he joins me now live. Sir, can you hear me okay?
I can.
I won't use a name for you, and I understand your panic about having backlash in this very public story. This is a very public case, but can you tell me how it was you first met Chris Watts?
It was on an app.
And what kind of an app was it?
It was kind of a social media app. The app's called Meet Me.
And when you met him on this app, how did he present himself, and what was the nature of him connecting with you?
He messaged me. It seemed all very innocent at first. On the profile, it didn't have a last name or anything. It just had his last initial. He was listed as straight and not bi or homosexual. So I was kind of off put by it, and then we talked for a while, and he just told me he wasn't really out or comfortable being out.
But eventually you met him in person, and take me from there. What happened?
Correct. I met him in person. He came over, the first time we met, he came over to the place I was staying in Loveland, Colorado, which is pretty much a neighboring town to Frederick.
And when you met, was it clear why he was there? Did Was it clear that he wanted a romantic relationship with you, or did that develop in time?
It was clear that he was interested in me and attracted to me.
And how soon was it that your relationship turned romantic?
That night.
How long did you continue a sexual relationship with Chris Watts?
Off and on until March or April.
So how does that time out? Is that about 9 or 10 months?
Yeah.
And during that time...
About 10 months.
Sorry, go ahead.
About 10 months. We originally met in June last year.
Okay. And during that time, did he ever tell you that he was married or had children?
No, I found out when we were both out and about. Well, I knew he had children. He told me he had children, but he portrayed it. He portrayed that he was single, and when there was some point in January, late January or February, that I met up with him and I got in his Ford pickup, and he had his daughters with him, and the oldest pretty much spilled the beans that he was still married. She asked him, I'm sorry, I'm so nervous. She asked him if she could sleep with him and mommy tonight. And that's when I found out.
We have breaking news just moments ago. Very shocking new allegations about that Colorado family man who stands accused of killing his wife and his 2 children. We are still talking to a man from Chris Watts' past who claims to be his former lover. We are not showing this man's face. We are not naming him. He is concerned about his life and about backlash. We want him to be able to continue living without fear of speaking out to us. We want to make it very clear. We sought this man out so that he can tell his side of the story. However, we can't independently verify the details that he describes, but we are going to continue speaking with him, this man who claims to be Chris Watts' former lover. Sir, can you still hear me?
I can.
Thank you so much for staying over the break. I do want to ask you your reaction when you heard the news that Chris Watts' family at first was missing.
I actually didn't even hear that they were missing. My ex-fiance knew that I had had relations with them, and I didn't hear anything until after the bodies were found.
And what was your reaction then?
I felt ill.
Did you reach out to him?
To Chris?
Yes.
No. After that, no.
When you found out that he'd been arrested, did it ever cross your mind that he is the man who did this?
No, but no and yes, because yeah, just through life experience, you never really know someone, and you never really know what someone is capable of. And the way he portrayed himself as this victim, and the way he just made me feel sympathy for him for going, you know, living this life and living this lie and going through all this, and told me that if it were to ever come out that he would be shunned and he wouldn't be allowed to see his girls. I really didn't know what to think. My first initial reaction was that I just felt ill. I felt nauseous.
Did you ever see any tendencies in Chris Watts towards violence?
No. He was one of the most gentle people I've ever met.
Did his behavior ever change from the moment you met him a year ago in June until you split with him in, I think, what, April or May?
Yes, after that I got a text from him to where it was very, very, very passive aggressive. And he had never showed that side of him before.
And can you go a little deeper there and tell me what you mean? Like, what was the text? What did the text say?
He flipped it around like I was the one in the wrong. He told me I did him dirty. He told me that I shouldn't have had all these empty promises, which there were no promises to him. I didn't promise to run away with him. I didn't promise to do any of that. And that's the way he portrayed it when he texted me.
All right, everyone, bear with me and buckle up. I'm going to lay this out as best I can, but stay with me. We're talking about a 12-hour framework. It is not a lot of time, just 12 hours. It starts at 1:48 in the morning on a Monday morning when Shanann Watts is dropped off. At 5:27 a.m., we know for a fact on video, Chris Watts' truck backs into the driveway and is seen shortly afterwards leaving. And at 1:40 p.m., we know the first officer is dispatched and this story begins to unravel. So if you do that math, 1:48 a.m. to 1:40 p.m., it is not even 12 full hours. And filling in the blanks in between starts to sound, frankly, remarkable. First, let's go to when Shanann Watts' friend Nicole starts calling in the morning and can't reach her friend. Calls so often she decides to go over. And when she gets there, she sees in the garage, Nicole sees her friend's car, and unfortunately, it's in the garage with car seats still affixed, which means those children and Shanann have likely not left that house. So she tries the front door. There's no answer, and the door is locked from the inside, but not with one of those deadbolts. It's latched with a hook, like those hotel latches from the inside. And we went and looked at the videos of that door, and look what we saw beneath that latch. Zoom in, and there's a piece of paper taped to the door. It takes a lot of clarity to read what the piece of paper says. But the paper says, "Lock me." Maybe this is just a coincidence. Something to tell everybody to lock the door from the inside, maybe at night when you sleep. But you cannot lock me from the outside. You can only lock me with that latch from the inside. So this was not Shanann Watts locking that door and then dying. More than likely, it was someone else. Let me carry on with the timeline. Now this friend of Nicole's is so worried that that latch won't let her open the door more than a couple of inches, she calls Chris, of course. Her worry is that her pregnant friend is inside, possibly fainted, passed out. The children may be at risk. Chris, come home, she says. The answer is unclear. But whatever his answer, she's now calling the police. And Officer 𝓂𝓛𝓝 is dispatched at approximately 1:40 p.m. When Officer 𝓂𝓛𝓝 gets to that front door, and he can't get in either, he notices something on the garage that would let him get in right away. It's the garage door opener. It's the electronic keypad. We all have them. You put in your code, and instantly you can get into that house. Well, what a great idea. He calls Chris on his cell phone and says, "Tell me the code. I have to get in. It's a welfare check on your wife." What do you think Chris's answer was to Officer 𝓂𝓛𝓝? That isn't working. That keypad isn't working. But I'll be there soon enough. I'll be there in about 5 minutes. Now put yourself inside the mind of Chris Watts. He's driving towards the scene that he knows all too well. He's driving approximately 12 hours later, right back up that driveway that he had just backed out of in the dark of night, with 3 bodies in the car, by his admission in the affidavit. When he begins to speak with Officer 𝓂𝓛𝓝 in the house, he tells that officer a couple of interesting facts. That he got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, had a conversation with 𝓗𝓛. Says 𝓗𝓛 arrived home from a trip around 2 a.m. and he woke up at 5 a.m. and began talking to 𝓗𝓛 about marital separation. And what do you suppose happened after that? He said he informed her he wanted to initiate the separation. 5 o'clock in the morning. That's easy to remember, because a lot of people wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But then 𝓂𝓛𝓝 asks for a little backup, and he asks Detective 𝓵𝓸𝓾𝓿 to come on over and help him with this investigation. And on the scene, Detective 𝓵𝓸𝓾𝓿 asks Chris, "Talk me through this period of time when you last saw your wife 𝓗𝓛." And Chris said, 𝓗𝓛 arrived home from the airport at approximately 1:48 a.m. Note that time, it's very accurate. 1:48 a.m. My wife comes in the door. 1:48, not somewhere around 2 a.m. or I don't know, after 1 o'clock in the morning. 1:48 a.m. He seems to know the time exactly. And then he says something even more curious. He says at approximately 4 a.m., he informed 𝓗𝓛 he wanted to go through with the separation, and they were both upset and crying. Wait a minute, 4 a.m.? I thought you said you woke up at 5 a.m. You told Officer 𝓂𝓛𝓝 you woke up at 5 a.m. So how'd you have a conversation with her at 4 a.m.? All of this is starting to sound pretty curious, right? And you can imagine these cops are pretty wise to these strange little stories he's telling them on the scene. In any case, he told these police officers one thing that was very consistent. He told them what time he backed his car up to load up his tools and head off to work. Again, not, I don't know, around 5 o'clock or 5:30 in the morning. He told them a specific time. He told 𝓂𝓛𝓝 5:27 a.m. And he told 𝓵𝓸𝓾𝓿 5:27 a.m. Bueller, if I can. John has a unique perspective on this case, as only he could, because he was with the Modesto Police Department as a detective on the Scott Peterson case. And lo and behold, here we have a proven liar again in our midst, a man who's all too friendly with the camera and lies with such ease. We've seen this with Casey Anthony. We've seen it with Drew Peterson. We've seen it with Scott Peterson. We've seen it time after time. This story takes the cake because of the nature of all the video leading up to it. But I do want you, John, to comment on this remarkable interview last night from this man who claims that he was with him. He was with Chris Watts romantically for 10 months. Give me your reaction.
Well, if this information is true, and it seems a little bit more likely tonight that it may be after hearing about Steve's excellent reporting on it, it does start to explain that incredible difference between the emotions we would expect of a father grieving their children and a guy like this that likely killed them. It seems like he was probably so far distant from this relationship and being a father, struggling with internal turmoil on where he wants to go, whether he wants to be with a woman or a man, and dealing with all this stuff that I think he probably checked out of being a father a long time before this crime actually occurred, which explains why he really is not affected by it, comparing his reaction, of course, to Shanann's father and her brother in the courtroom.
I want to ask you about something Steve and I were just talking about. I think it stood out to you as well, Steve, that remarkable big black mess of ink on the affidavit that we all got. An affidavit that is filled with details, really specific details from the police, and yet some critical details are missing. John, you're an investigator. You're a detective. You have filled out these warrants. You have written these warrants. You have probably helped to redact some of them. Does this stand out as a little more information redacted than needs to be redacted if you're just trying to protect the name of some affair at work?
Well, not necessarily so much that, but it's just the fact that the defense came to the court and had that information redacted from the document. Usually that's done by the prosecution, and so it's kind of unusual to see this happen. It suggests that maybe Chris has some intense allegiance and affection for whoever is in there, and he wants to protect them, and that seems like that would probably make some sense. But for us to do it in law enforcement, yeah, we would do that, but not to this extent. And oftentimes, if we were going to do anything like that, we'd just seal the affidavit so that nobody could see it until the case progressed a little bit further.
So I get it. I get it. Even while he's facing down the biggest crisis of his life, the potential of going, you know, to the death chamber. That's what he's facing while he's getting his lawyer to protect his sweetheart. Even that, I'll give him that, okay? I'll give him that. Does it require taking 4 full lines out of the affidavit? Or does that sound like there's a lot more information than just name, address, and maybe work position?
Well, it does to me, because, like you said, it isn't going to take that much redacting to get that out of there. But just the mere fact that the defense made that claim, or that petition to the court to have it done, and they took so much out, I'm looking for Steve to uncover that tomorrow. I'm hoping he can do that.